Football is important. It's the most important thing.
And welcome back to the NFLandU podcast, everyone. It is Wednesday, December 23rd. I know, not used to hearing us in the middle of the week, but it's not Friday in case you couldn't tell. And it's a very Christmassy edition, in case you couldn't tell by our 6 sweater game we got going on. We'll model them for you here in a second. I'm your host, as always, Hayden Vassar, joined by a very festive-looking Mark Hogan. Mark, how you doing, my man?
I'm doing great, Hayden. Like you said, it's Christmas week, and the only reason we have to bring this forward so early is I'm such a mess now wrapping all of my gifts. That's the only reason. It's not like there's anything big coming up later on in the week. It was just purely I'm going to run out of time later in the week to record our podcast as per usual. But no, great to be back and early, and looking forward to a bit of a different show this week. Obviously, we're not going to be previewing the games. We're looking at some other topics, some hot topics that it seemed really like the perfect week, 2 weeks to go. A lot of just a lot set up in the air as far as the season and certain teams, and what better way than we're going to discuss the Jets in a minute, really throwing a wrench in the whole plans. So yeah, looking forward to kind of a different, more laid back feel. And yeah, we're doing it in these beautiful Christmas jumpers. We both were lucky enough to own one of these.
Yeah.
And it's worked out
well. Let's model them. Oh, here we go. You ready for this sick sequence game we got going on? You got the star. Let me move my microphone. You got the snowflakes up here. You got the trees. You got the star down here, and more stars over here. It's Christmas time, baby.
If you're on the, I won't do the modeling. I'll go for our audio-based crowd. I wear a red jumper with a Cardinals logo across it with Christmas trees and some snowflakes by the looks of things. But no, it's fun. It's fun. Beautiful. The only reason I was hell bent on getting an episode done this week was so I could wear this thing and for it to make sense.
He has been on this all week. He just wants us to do it in the Christmas sweaters, and it was a beautiful idea. I'll give him credit for it. It is looking pretty sexy right now. But as Mark mentioned a second ago, he's right. There's going to be a very different edition of the podcast. It's the only one we're doing this week. We're not going to be previewing the games like normal on this week's episode. It's going to be a chill talk between me and Mark, just talking about football and what's going on in the NFL. Very fitting for this year. Just want to, take it out nice and easy. But if you want to see our picks, you'll be able to see them on our social media pages on Friday, like normal, when Mark gets that super sexy graphic up.
Yeah, it'll probably be up earlier than Friday, seeing as Christmas is Friday.
Better.
And if you're on Twitter on Friday, I mean, yeah, obviously, but I don't think I'll be on Twitter on Friday. Maybe for the game, obviously, we're going to have New Orleans and playing the Vikings on Christmas Day, which is such a strange thing to have a game on Christmas. I know basketball and stuff is the rage over there on Christmas, but it's definitely a different feel to this week's slate of games, the way that they're fitting around the big day itself.
Yeah, it's weird. I honestly can't remember the last time we had a Christmas Day game, in all honesty, but like we said, it's just going to be a little different this week. Nothing to panic about. Just kick back, relax, and enjoy a nice festive football conversation with your favorite football bros, me and Mark. So, Mark, you mentioned the Jets a couple minutes ago, and in case you're living under a rock right now, the Jets finally won a football game, Mark. They did the thing. Even after I got off their bandwagon, they did the thing. They beat the Rams in Los Angeles, the biggest upset of the year. And why are all the Jets fans acting like a family member died? They are not happy at all that they won this game, Mark. Not one bit.
Well, why would you be? I mean, the disappointment is obviously understandable. I have one Jets friend who, I think I said it to you on the show last week. I talked to him, and it was about showing that they could win, but they didn't want to win these last couple of weeks, and that's gone back to the Raiders game when it was like, yeah, we put out the tape, we showed we're good enough, but we had that excitement and held on to the first overall pick. Yesterday, they went and obviously won, which, I'm going to talk about Todd Gurley going in for the touchdown earlier on in the year against Detroit. Do you remember when he crossed the line? He wasn't supposed to, and he was seen out the game. It felt the same way, that it was obviously. Now we should mention, and I'm so glad that this will always go down as an example that teams do not tank in the NFL. If you're going to do it, it'd be for a superstar like Trevor Lawerence. And it was mentioned, did Greg Williams bring out that blitz, to tank for the season? And was he trying to do the team a favor? And I've always gone back to it that the players don't want to lose. And DeAndre Hopkins came out after the Cardinals game yesterday, made a similar comment. They asked him, is this one of your greatest, or is this one of the more exciting wins of the season? And he was kind of saying, like, no, don't just underestimate the Eagles. Like, yeah, it was an exciting win, but he said it's made to be an 8-8 league that any team can beat anyone on any given Sunday. And he said it's just the respect that players have for one another, the competitive nature that's within each of them, the talent. He said no one gets here without merit. And, you know, like that was DeAndre Hopkins wasn't involved in that game. Obviously, there was the Rams, which was in the division, but it was just talking about like it's super competitive. And I'm just glad we can always go back and point it. Now, the Jets, with all that was on the line, still weren't willing to tank, even though now it's going to come with these dire consequences, you'd imagine.
Yeah, just a little bit. A lot of the reaction pieces coming out immediately after that game, after they beat the Rams. Like I said, biggest upset of the season, people. The ageless wonder, Frank Gore, getting that late first down to help seal the win. And listen, a lot of knee-jerk reactions about that Jets win have been the Jets are going to be feeling the outcome, the fallout of that win for years to come, because everybody just assumes there's no way they're getting the first overall pick now. Now, when I said that I wanted the Jets to win, I didn't do the math, and that's my fault, because I didn't look into the tiebreaker scenarios that if the Jags and Jets ended the year with both a win each, I didn't realize that the Jags would own the tiebreaker. That's just on me. And that's where we sit now, is that since the Rams lost and the Jets won, the Jaguars now own the number one overall pick. I don't know if you watched the Sunday Night Football broadcast, like the pregame, like the Football Night in America. I don't know if they air that over in your side of the world, Mark, to be brutally honest with you. I should have probably looked into that, but
no, we don't. It's quicker for you to just ask me. No, we don't. They cut to the game a couple of minutes before it begins over here.
Okay.
And they get out of it as soon as the quarterbacks do the handshake. That's when our coverage ends as well.
So on Sunday Night Football in America, they have this guy that they come out ever since the election, because in the election cycle, they had these guys that were in front of maps of America, and they would look at counties and how they were voting, and they would circle like, oh, this county's 55% and yada, yada, yada. Well, they trotted out the NBC guy, but now he's doing football stuff. And, you know, every week he's doing playoff predictions like, oh, here's where the NFC East, if the Giants win tonight, here's what their number will be, a possibility of winning the division. They did that for the Jets, and that going into the Sunday game against the Rams, they had a better than 70% chance to end up with the first overall pick. Because of the win, that percentage now drops to less than 35. It was cut less than half. And that is very disastrous, because for a lot of these Jets fans, that was the only thing that kept them going. And that it really was, is like all this pain was going to be worth it on draft night. That, okay, we'll take the 0-16 season on the chin as long as we get Trevor Lawerence. And now it looks like if Jacksonville loses out, which it could very well may, Trevor Lawerence would be going to Jacksonville right now.
General manager go on.
No, go ahead.
General manager for the Cardinals, Steve Keim, that year that the Cardinals had the first overall pick, made a comment saying, in the last week of the season, saying, yeah, this sucks now, but it's going to feel great come April.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what having the first overall pick is. It's like at the end of the day, when you get into the off season, it's so exciting for the fans. I can only imagine the sports radio talk in New York for months. It was going to be talking about Trevor Lawerence. Even when Kyler Murray was coming to the Cardinals, there's still the whole, oh, is he the guy? And it's very exciting to have, and there's no messing then. It's like, oh, you can even trade it away for a bunch of capital. That all went out the window, it seems. And that's what's most devastating about this, is just their whole future was taken away. And like you said, it can maybe roll on for years now.
Yeah.
And I messaged our friend David from last week's pick, who's a Jets fan.
Mm-hmm.
And I he seemed like a rational guy, and I asked him about it, and he said, look, I was a Sam Darnold guy from the beginning. I thought that it could work with him, and we're kind of just gone back to that. And if that's it, so be it. And it was kind of something that I thought about myself. And it's like, where does this end up now? Does this save Adam Gaze's job? I don't think so. But is it also a thing that, like, you have the pieces in place and you're just going to be forced to try another head coach with Sam Darnold, even though another head coach would have come in so easily to work with Trevor Lawerence, but now the number one place to coach is going to be in Jacksonville if Doug Marrone doesn't hold on. then the other question is going to be, okay, new head coach comes in. Are we going to have to hang on to Sam Darnold, but we'll add Justin Fields into the quarterback room? Because it seems ultimately they're going to have to go with the quarterback anyway. But is that a waste of the former first overall pick, Sam Darnold? You can't even trade him away, but like you're gonna have to get rid of him anyway. It's an extremely messy situation, and it's like now they're gonna have to make do. Whereas this time on Sunday we were saying the world is their oyster, and I think that's where the devastation comes from. It's like when you have your own destiny in your own hands, and in this, it was a good destiny to be able to control this generational talent who we've talked about for so long. And the Jets deserve him. I mean, they are the worst team this year, bar a couple of weeks now where they have looked good. And we kept on saying we played the numbers. We knew that 0-16 was so difficult to do. But it's like they were the worst team, whatever about strength of schedule. Anyone that had some eyes, even though Jacksonville was awful, and their only win came in the first week of the season when they upset our Indianapolis Colts, they still deserve to win a couple of games. And their defense had you saying only a few weeks in the show that they were better than you expected and they were worth a couple more wins. And, you know, there's not the same cry for change in Jacksonville as there is in New York. The whole fundamentals behind New York seem to be failing. Whereas in Jacksonville, it's that they just need a quarterback and they can start rebuilding from there. Even though at the start of the season, we did say that they needed a rebuild. We did note that they had some pieces that they would have been able to trade away. And yeah, I think that's what's most devastating. If we look now to who Jacksonville has, though, they have the Chicago Bears and the Indianapolis Colts. And this is what I said to David, I find very tricky. He thinks that the New York Jets will still end up with the first overall pick, even though he said he's happy with Sam Darnold. But he said Chicago Bears and Indianapolis Colts. And I said they are in the thick of the playoff race, those two teams. Like Chicago, you feel is going to be able to get a win. And then Indianapolis in the last week of the season, they're certainly going to have stuff on the line the way that AFC race is shaping up, you know. The Jets, on the other hand, have the Browns and the Patriots. And I thought, Hayden, wouldn't it be so like Bill Belichick to say, screw it, I don't want Trevor Lawerence. I don't want a division foe getting Trevor Lawerence. They can have the win. They can have the second overall pick, and I'll battle Justin Fields for the next however long I stay around for.
Listen, I love that you and I are on the same page that Bill Belichick would pull something like that. But I do want to point out something that Mark was talking about, that Jets fans seem to be all over the place with the exception of David, that some of them are saying, oh, let's run it back with Sam and just draft a defensive player. Some of them are saying, no, let's still draft a quarterback. I mean, there's still some good ones out there just because you can't get Trevor Lawerence. Mark mentioned Justin Fields from Ohio State. You got Zach Wilson from BYU, who a lot of people really like, and Trey Lance from North Dakota State. People have been raving about his mechanicals all year long. There's still some good guys out there to at least look into if you're New York. The world has not ended because right now you've lost the overall pick. It is not just over yet. But they are acting like it's a death in the family, and I can understand why. But to Jacksonville, like Mark said, Mark freaking stole the words right out of my notes. They have pieces that I like. They got Robinson. I really like DJ Chark. I don't know why I called him James Robinson. DJ Chark and Laviska Shenault on offense. They need some help on defense. And, of course, the all-important quarterback. Jacksonville could be something in a couple of years if they play this thing right and maybe, just not try as hard the next 2 weeks. But the Colts game is interesting. It's really interesting. Like Mark said, they're going to be in the AFC playoff race, but Jacksonville's lone win was week 1 against the Colts. Granted, it was kind of a fluky win, but it still counts in the record books. It'll be something to watch.
I wonder, will New York regress now? I mean, like, they had that energy behind them because they wanted to get the win. And I think now it's going to be all that excitement in the air is going to die down again. And because they were playing out of their skin there for a few weeks. Like we talked about how we thought that the chance for them to win had come and gone, especially after the way they played against Seattle. But that kind of, has evaporated once more, I would think. I feel, though, like the ramifications, like you're saying there, league-wide now for the drafts has been opened up because it was such a foregone conclusion that it was going to be Trevor Lawerence to the Jets because it just excused everything. Because he's such a generational talent, it excused everything. It excused getting rid of Adam Gase. It excused getting rid of Sam Darnold. I don't know, can you say the same thing for Justin Fields? That wasn't supposed to be the narrative, and it's a harder sell. I mean, it could definitely happen, but Trevor Lawerence was the guy that you do that around. So if he goes to Jacksonville, then you don't know if the Jets are going to take Justin Fields or not.
Mhm.
And then it's like, who's it gonna? The Bengals are lined up next, the Texans after them, the Panthers, all these teams. I said to my brother recently, as recent as last week, even when the Eagles and Cowboys looked like they could be in play for the number 3 overall pick, I said, wouldn't it be a great spot to get, because outside of quarterback, you're getting the best player in the draft.
Yes, absolutely.
And now it's not necessarily going to happen like that, because maybe New York is going to say, yeah, we'll keep going with Sam Darnold, and they take the best player. So it's opened up all these kinds of possibilities. And I'm glad that we get to talk about it in such depth on today's show, because we couldn't in a regular Jets preview. And in a couple of weeks' time, we're going to have the answers to these questions anyway. So it's the excitement going in with 2 weeks to go with this. Just in such a fine balance. And yeah, it's the first overall pick is super interesting now. We thought it was a foregone conclusion there, but it's certainly not.
Yeah, so that's about it for what we're going to talk about for the draft and the Jets and all that, because I think we spent a lot more time than I think most people would normally spend on the Jets. But we're going to start talking about this a lot more in the coming weeks as, draft stuff ramps up as we get into, February and March and April, and we eventually get to the draft. So it's fun to start learning these names and thinking about these possibilities now. That way, when it finally happens in April and, let's say the Jags draft Trevor Lawerence at 1, then we can all kind of understand what the Jets are going to be doing at 2 if they end up at 2. But yeah. Right now, Jags at 1, Jets at 2, and Jets fans are very not happy about it. And that's putting it mildly.
Well, it brings in, how are they going to take out their frustration now, Hayden? And it might be that they look for Adam Gaze's head. Maybe. Bringing us into something else that I wanted to talk about. The number 1 overall pick is drawing to a conclusion, but something that happened over the weekend that I noticed, I'm sure you noticed as well, was we thought certain head coaches were in the hot seat. Mm-hmm. And we said last week how there was teams on the hot seat that might want a performance to save some jobs. And it seems like each of them got one.
Yes.
If we want to start off with Anthony Lynn, I think he's perhaps the most fascinating of each of them. Because with Justin Herbert right now, that team's looking amazing. But I don't attribute it to Anthony Lynn. That's my problem. I don't know what you think. But I think that Anthony Lynn has been at the root of the problem regards their biggest problems, time management. They certainly would have been able to win games over the last couple of years if he had managed games better. And last year that was kind of put down to Phillip Rivers a bit, and that he was throwing interceptions, but he's been taken out. So, Anthony Lynn has been the constant now. And I think that's certainly a problem. And then his aggressiveness on and off the field. We mentioned it a bunch, and I think that it's going to be what gets him fired ultimately. The aggressiveness just on the field when games are in the balance and stuff. He hasn't been able to show the kind of clutchness that the best guys, the likes of the Sean McVays, the Andy Reids, even the Harbaughs, like that kind of clutchness to make the right call. It's not associated with Anthony Lynn, and it's been or bust in this league. You're not hanging on for a guy that I know he's defensive side of the ball or whatever, but you don't hang around for a guy that's second best. You want the best there is, and I just don't think Anthony Lynn, even though he's a great coach and whoever gets him ultimately, you're certainly as a coordinator, you'd imagine he's going to go to next. Like, they're going to be super lucky, but as a head coach, they're just going to have to move on because it's not working with them. And what better time to bring in a head coach? If I just mentioned a second ago, Jacksonville is going to have Trevor Lawerence. Everyone's going to want to go to Jacksonville unless Justin Herbert's a position with him holds up. Eric Bieniemy, your guy, where does he go? We thought that he was going to go to the Jets because he gets Trevor Lawerence. Well, if he's going to get his pick of teams, would he want to stay in the division? I mean, maybe he doesn't because he's going to think that Kansas City is too difficult and he doesn't want to go up against Patrick Mahomes. But if there's a bit of uncertainty about Trevor Lawerence, you're going to say, well, Justin Herbert looks like the real deal. He needs to just be matched up with a guy like Bieniemy. And I think that's a super exciting role. And the Chargers themselves would know that. They're like, we have our pieces here. We know we're super attractive. We know we have pieces on the offense. And they could be one to say, yeah, do you know what? This is the best time. Because if we wait a year, maybe Justin Herbert doesn't look as good, or he's just hasn't had that good year behind him because we've wasted his second year in the league. And it's harder to get a head coach then.
with the way that teams had fired coaches throughout the year, like, Detroit and Houston and Atlanta, I was expecting Anthony Lynn to kind of be gone at some point before the season ended because of the way the Chargers had looked. I mean, Mark touched on it with, the clock management and how they looked. There were times where the Chargers just looked like the most unorganized team in the league, and that's saying something when the Jets still hadn't had a win yet. That really says something. And they won that game on Thursday night against the Raiders, not really because of Anthony Lynn, mainly because of Justin Herbert's brilliance. It wasn't anything Anthony Lynn did at all. And I feel like that's kind of been a common core throughout the entirety of the season. I mean, you got to remember, he didn't want to start Justin Herbert. The only reason Justin Herbert's a starter is because Tyrod Taylor got shanked by an athletic trainer in the lungs. Like, that's the only reason he's a starter. And it just bothers me so much that they keep allowing this kind of mismanagement to happen. And I agree with Mark that if you're going to strike, the time is now to do it. Don't gamble and say, well, let's just try it one more year and see what happens. It doesn't work. There is no reason to try to force it to work again. I'm not exactly sold on the idea that Eric Bieniemy would stay in the division. I do know for certain that this man is going to be a great head coach at some point. I just think that he's too loyal to Andy Reid to, go to the division rival and have to play, his guys twice a year. I mean, he's beloved in that locker room and he loves all those guys. I just don't like the idea of him staying in that division. I feel like he would go elsewhere, maybe Jacksonville, like Mark said, or the Jets, or maybe he would go to Atlanta, ride it up with Matt Ryan. Who knows? But I do think Eric Bieniemy would finally get his call up this season, hopefully, because there are so many teams that need help on offense and so many teams are going to be getting a new quarterback. This would be the perfect opportunity to learn from him. But yeah, Anthony Lynn, it's his time is coming. There's literally nothing he can do at this point to save his job. And that really hurts me to say because I've loved Anthony Lynn and his time in LA. I was a big supporter of his when he first got the job and I absolutely loved him. It just hasn't worked out. And sometimes that just happens. It's just not working out. And that's okay. But the Chargers need to move on at some point and get a guy to help their young quarterback develop. That is the most important thing to that entire organization is developing Justin Herbert. And whoever can best do that, you write them a blank check. It is as simple as that, LA. It is as simple as that.
Maybe you get Eric Bieniemy as the head coach in Jacksonville and Anthony Lynn as the offensive coordinator with Trevor Lawerence. Seems like a win-win for the two guys all of a sudden.
I like it.
Another offense that kind of is getting clicking that I certainly, all bets are off on this one. Philadelphia Eagles, Doug Peterson. It seemed like the city was too loyal to Doug Peterson and they were looking who they should scapegoat. And I think with how Doug Peterson has Jalen Hurts playing now, I think they have their answer there, and it's Carson Wentz. Now, I don't think they necessarily have to get rid of Wentz unless Wentz forces his way out. It seems like he's certainly getting a bit tetchy, and he's putting it out there that he doesn't want to remain if he is going to be a backup. Again, I was talking to my brother about this, and it's like, how do they dangle that card in front of him? Do they tell him that, oh, you can have a chance? I don't think he wants to stay around to win the role back. Do they say, oh, you are? I don't think that works out. But he's going to be professional and he's not going to, hold out or whatever like that. I don't think he would hurt his stock too much. But I also think rival teams and general managers will know the position that the Eagles are in, holding on to Carson Wentz. Money aside, I mean, if he wants out, that they're going to have to deal him anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that will lower his price, and that's what's going to get a bit tricky, whether Philadelphia pulls the trigger or not on getting rid of him. But it's definitely interesting. There was those rumors a couple of years ago that Carson Wentz wasn't, overly liked in the organization or certainly in the locker room.
Yep.
And that kind of seems to hold true now, I think, all of a sudden. You have former players coming out this week and hyping up Nick Foles and who was it? Was it Kelsey that came out? The center, Kelsey.
Oh, Jason Kelsey.
I think it was Kelsey. I could be wrong now. Someone came out during the week and they were kind of confirmed that story through praising Nick Foles and not, showing much love for Carson Wentz's position right now being benched. And it's definitely interesting. Maybe there's no loyalty to the guy there. He does seem like he's a bit tough to get on with. And maybe the players would be happy to move on with him as well. I don't know where he lands, he's obviously still a quality starter, I think. I mean,
Mhm.
like he had a down year this year, but I wouldn't write him off at all. He did have that MVP season. I know there's all these reasons why you shouldn't like him. I still do. But I think Jalen Hurts has been electric. He playing the Cardinals this week. My God, like I said to you last week in the show, I don't know if he's going to. I think that was not a fluke, but I didn't believe that the Cardinals would be blown open by a
Mhm.
running quarterback. But he was the best that's done it against them all year. He was phenomenal with his feet yesterday. Like it was so exciting as far as losses go. This is what I'm talking about with the Jets. You want to show that you can beat a team without giving up your draft position. That's what the Eagles did yesterday. They were ferocious. It was so scary.
Mhm.
And I wouldn't rule them out if they could make the playoffs. And it's something, again, we're going to talk about later on, whether they or Washington will go into the playoffs.
Mhm.
It's difficult now because of the way it's set up for Washington. Like it seems like a foregone conclusion. But I just thought they were ferocious. And if you want to look at something, Alshon Jeffrey can sum it up
Yeah.
to you. He was a nobody for most of this year. And all of a sudden, in the last 2 games, he's turned back the clock and he looked
Mhm.
class.
Yeah. I'm so happy you brought this up because that was something I wanted to talk to you about before we started recording and I forgot about it. But yeah, Jalen Hurts went off on Sunday against Arizona. He got 4 total touchdowns, 3 passing, 1 rushing. And that's very important in that, that first game he started, he did it all with his legs. And the second game, he did a lot of the damage with his arm. That's very, very important. And I'm with Mark that Carson Wentz is starting to look like the poor guy who's going to be scapegoated in this. And I've heard a lot of talk from like beat reporters and people in the national media that are praising Doug Peterson for, doesn't Doug's coaching look great now that Jalen Hurts is out there? Well, I want to give Doug Peterson kind of some shade for this because you had Jalen Hurts on the bench all this time. And if he really was this good this entire time, that looks much worse on Doug Peterson that he allowed Wentz to sit out there and struggle like this for that long. I mean, my God, could you imagine if Jalen Hurts had been out there doing this kind of stuff in November? The Eagles could have had an entirely different season. The last 2 weeks, the Eagles have looked better on offense than they have in 2 years. I'm going back to the entirety of last season as well, because they weren't that great on offense either. The last 2 weeks have just been great. And if Hurts can keep this up to close out the season over these next 2 weeks, I really think he's got a legitimate shot to be their starter next year. I really do. And if Carson Wentz can't handle that, I mean, I think it was a couple weeks ago the reports came out after he got benched that was the beginning of his kind of like mental downfall with the Eagles, was that they drafted Hurts and that upset him so badly. It upset Wentz. And now the kid's come out here and is absolutely balling. I mean, if I'm Carson Wentz, like, fine, just go somewhere else at this point. Like, I've liked Carson Wentz. I really have. It's just at some point everybody's got to look at each other and realize maybe we all just need a fresh start. Maybe if Carson Wentz goes to somewhere else, a different team that needs a quarterback, maybe that'll fix his problems. And if Doug Peterson moves on to a different quarterback not named Carson Wentz, who I think Doug Peterson's record in his time with the Philadelphia Eagles, it's like 11-3 with quarterbacks not named Carson Wentz. That's insane. No team does that with not their starting quarterback. And it's so sad that their offense can only work when Carson Wentz isn't out there. I know the problems aren't all on him. I know the offensive line has been terrible. I know the wide receivers have been hit or miss, like Mark said, with Alshon Jeffrey, who had been a literal nobody all year. But when Hurts comes in, he makes it work. It's as simple as that. And that's really sad. It really is.
Well, you mentioned there Doug Peterson's 8-3 with a quarterback.
Thank you. That's the number. Thank
no,
you.
I mean, I'm just quoting your number back to you. I did see something like that. I haven't it updated since obviously yesterday's game. I don't know if that's 11-4 now, but the one thing that's missing on the end of that is on a Super Bowl. I mean,
yes,
he has that in the city, and I read during the year and little snippets here and there that they are loyal to him, even at the worst of times this season. That was still the narrative that was going around this team, that Doug Peterson is too well liked, and he brought him the championship, and that's worth a bad season as it is now, and you can let them pick it up next year. I mean, yeah, a couple of bad seasons in a row. If they have another one next year as bad as this, yeah, that's when you start to panic. But I think it would be a real shame if they got rid of him this year. I mean, look, they missed on Andy Reid a few years ago. They let Andy Reid go, and he's been like, anyone would trade first round pick if he'd come to their team now, especially with a young quarterback. But I'll also forgive Doug Peterson for not putting in Jalen Hurts a bit sooner, because it was a tricky call. You really did you thought the Carson Wentz was going to get out of it. You thought the whole offense was going to get out of that hole. Then they had the Browns, the Seahawks, and the Packers back to back to back. You eventually then went in against the Saints, which it wasn't a tough, it was scheduled to navigate anyway for them. That, yeah, when he went in, then it was a crazy upset. But he has looked phenomenal, Jalen Hurts, and I think he has saved the job of Doug Peterson. I wouldn't have put it in too much doubt myself, but certainly they have their answer now, and the Eagles would be wise to stick with him, And the other one, and I suppose I'll let you talk about it a bit. I don't know your thoughts on Matt Nagy hanging around in Chicago, especially if they can continue to win down the stretch.
Ooh, I was going to save Matt Nagy talk for when we got to momentum here in a minute, but I'll preview some of my stuff. Listen, Bears are playing pretty good right now, and I say that without a hint of joke or irony or anything like that. They're playing pretty good right now, and you remember it was before the Texans game, Mark, when we previewed that one. You had this line. I don't remember the exact phrasing, and maybe you could help me remember it. You talked about that potentially jobs could be in jeopardy if, Deshaun Watson, who the Bears could have drafted, comes in and shows the Bears up. But that never happened. And Trubisky looked great, and he's looked great the 3 games he's been back. I'll talk about the numbers a bit here in a couple of minutes, but the Bears look great, and I think they're saving jobs in Chicago and what looked like a completely dire straits. If the Bears find a way to win out, I think Matt Nagy can save his job in Chicago.
I think it's so tricky because, again, you want to move on, and they got by the skin of their teeth. That why would recency bias save him his job? We know that it all comes down to Black Monday now in 2 weeks' time, when you have to have your head coach fired so you can line up another one. There's no point waiting around. So if they're going by the recency bias and they let these couple games, come and go and they're happy, I don't know. I think it might be a mistake. He hasn't shown enough. It's been talked about before this offseason that since that coach of the year season that he had, that he hasn't shown enough since then. And it's funny that running the ball is what's gotten them back. I mean, that's what it was yesterday. And it kind of is I think Mitchell Trubisky is definitely playing better. I know, again, when we texted about this yesterday, you mentioned the fumble, it was an interception yesterday.
Oh, yeah, it was a late game interception that set up the Vikings' final drive. Yeah, it was an ugly pick, but other than that, he played good.
Well, when it was shown on Red Zone, I had already got it in a good taste in my mouth from what I'd seen of him. Again, I haven't watched the game back in full, but certainly in the first half, they were kind of rolling. And maybe that was partly because the Vikings weren't looking as good. But yeah, when they had come out like that, I was kind of thinking he's looked good. But again, that's one you have to pull the trigger on. You can't keep on putting in a second string guy, go and draft someone or whatever. You can't continue doing that and just hoping the pressure game is what gets to Mitchell Trubisky, and that a borderline starter behind him, like Nick Foles was this year, is just going to fill in and save your season after 5 wins. I mean, today or this year was the best case scenario for the Chicago Bears, that they held on, they put Mitchell Trubisky on the bench at the right time, and the season still imploded on them. I mean, they still have a bit of a chance there against Jacksonville this week, but I think that it's tough to win out because Green Bay is going to be there in the final week, and Green Bay, having secured the bye anyway at that point, might want to rest players, but I just don't. There's something about that when it's a division team that you're not going to gift your division foe a chance at the playoffs. Perhaps I just think that rivalry, the oldest in the NFL and all that, I just think it's too much that they're going to roll over. I mean, it's happened obviously in the past, but I think that rivalry itself, I find it a bit tougher to think that Chicago, you can automatically give them the W. Again, Green Bay will probably have it tied up by then, and that makes this interesting as well. What's a win against that team? If he gets them into the playoffs, I suppose they're going to have one more. Yeah. But there's just something about it that I think you'd be wise to move on from Matt Nagy. But who knows? He like you said, they're playing well enough now. He's after reinventing the offense to a certain point by getting the ball running, even though Twitter was the one that was telling him to get running the ball. But it perhaps has saved his job too. But I know that the number of head coaches that usually goes, we talked about this at the beginning of the year. We were wondering who's it going to be. Yeah, it's seems to be at least 5 each year. And if we have Patricia and Dan Quinn already gone, and then 2 of these guys, Anthony Lynn and Matt Nagy, say go, that's 4. And
Yeah.
probably, oh, and then the Texans job, of course, is open as well. That's your 5 there.
That's 5 right there.
So I don't know who else is on the fringe, but I think those are your top 3 candidates. I think Doug Peterson is safe.
Agreed.
Anthony Lynn and Adam Gase we've missed as well, of course. So that could be your 6. So take your pick out of those.
Listen, I'm going to tell you a story, Mark. Do you remember a couple of years ago is the year the Eagles won the Super Bowl? In the first round of the playoffs, the Tennessee Titans went to Kansas City to play the Chiefs in the wild card round. And I don't remember the name of the Titans head coach, but upper management had basically all agreed before the game that no matter what happens in that game, they were going to fire the Titans head coach. And then the Titans go out and they win the game against Kansas City. It was a massive upset and everybody's super happy. And the Titans do the unthinkable. Upper management is so happy in the heat of the moment. They agree to give the head coach a contract extension, even though they had all kind of agreed that they were going to fire him no matter what. So they go to next week to play New England, and they get murdered by the Patriots. It's a horrific blowout, probably one of the worst Titans postseason losses ever. And then after the game, then they fire the head coach that they just agreed to like a 5-year extension to the week before. That's the kind of thing Mark's talking about in the heat of the moment and recency bias. Don't let that cloud your judgment. If you really want to move on, and if that's the thing you're set on, don't let a sudden wild card berth and maybe a close wild card loss to like a top seed. Don't let that cloud your judgment, Chicago. If you're dead set on firing him, you got to pull the trigger and just bite the bullet. It's as simple as that.
I'm glad that you brought up that example. I was trying to think of it earlier on who it was, and I couldn't. Mike Mularkey, yeah, you got it in one. Well, you got it in 2. I'm just after going on to his Wikipedia page now. He's not coaching anyone now, so it just goes to show. I thought he'd be in the college game or something. Mm-hmm. Did he end up with having another stint? I mean, maybe when we're doing our next section, I can bring it up by the end of the episode.
Yeah, I'll buy you some time in the next segment when we can go there next, because I think we've talked enough about coaches. So we're going into our final segment where we talk about.
I can tell you quickly now. I did find our answer. So yeah, he went from being the Titans head coach that year to he took a year out. Last year was the tight ends coach for the Falcons, and gone again. He was obviously one of those names that was scorched with the that team last year, the Falcons, when Dan Quinn barely held on to his job. So again, Dan Quinn holding on to his job kind of says to me, why would you keep on forcing it? Just because of a late season run like they had last year in Atlanta, that Matt Nagy has shown what he has. And he, to me, is the number 1. Anthony Lynn probably is the number 1 to me that has to go. He's just not getting it done. Matt Nagy after that. But yeah, again, it's something to pay attention to for the next 2 weeks. And I guess we're on record with who we think will or won't go.
Yeah. So Adam Gase, Anthony Lynn, and Matt Nagy. Those are names to watch, and we do believe Doug Peterson will be safe. You heard it here first, folks. So that's exactly what's going to happen in the next couple of weeks.
You can all sleep in on Black Monday.
You won't miss anything because you heard it here first. So that's it for Coaches Talk, and we're going to move on to our last segment. We're going to talk a bit about momentum. And go ahead, Mark. Go ahead.
Before that, we were going to talk about one more team. Kind of something similar before we did. I wanted to, while we had the chance on this week's show, I wanted to talk about the Falcons a bit more.
Thank you.
Because they are one of these teams. They are one of these teams that got rid of their head coach. Mm-hmm. But I think that it's just showing something fundamentally wrong with the Falcons now this year. And that's the blown leads. You've a new regime, if you want to call it, even though it's what's the word? Temporary, whatever they call it. Interim.
Yeah, interim. There you go.
Even though it's an interim team at the moment. But yesterday's loss to Tampa Bay, we talked last week about why we didn't think that the Falcons could win on any given Sunday anymore. Mm-hmm. And they come out and they take this lead against Tampa Bay. And you and I both have the same thought. No, they're not going to do it. And thank God we hadn't picked them in this game, because it would have been more heartbreak. I could only think of our friend Jelani, who's watching on. They don't need the win necessarily, but it's still, it's obviously a rival, and you can perhaps knock Tampa Bay out of playoffs if you beat them this week and then they play them again. And there's so much on the line, and you can't figure it out. And I put it down to Matt Ryan and their reliance on the passing game, because Atlanta does have this ferocious passing game, one of the best in the league, with Matt Ryan as your quarterback, who at the beginning of the year, I said, we were previewing who we thought could win the passing title. And I said, the only thing that happens each year in that category is Matt Ryan will be top 5 because they have such a good passing offense and he's such a great passer. And when you have Julio Jones there, when you have Calvin Ridley there, you're going to be passing the ball. And I think that comes back to bite them because when they take these leads, their offense is all made on the passing game and they can't seem to run the ball when they need to. Now, in 4 times this year, the team has had a 95% chance of winning the game.
Oh, no.
That's against the Bears, against the Cowboys, against the Lions, against the Bucks. Now, against Detroit, obviously, it was that the running game didn't know how to do its job. Todd Gurley got in for the touchdown.
Yeah.
Which was remarkable. Detroit, it was kind of this... Yeah, they should never have given up. Oh, sorry, that is the Detroit. They should never have given up. The defense should never have given up, I should say. Sorry, as I mumble across it. The defense should have never allowed them to get in position. You know, Matt Stafford just took off for whatever amount of yards and however many seconds. But then you go against Dallas. They had the, 17-point lead or whatever it was at halftime. They came out and they passed the ball more in the second half than they ran it. Matt Ryan then has a couple of incompletions late in the game. You know, he had been fine, but then he had like 2 straight incompletions. The team has to go for a field goal late, and then it gives Dallas back the ball, and then they're able to control their own destiny from there. It seemed they got the touchdown, then the punt. Chicago, they were up in that game too. They go and pass the ball 4 times and only run it 2 times. They punt. Then they get a missed field goal after passing the ball only 2 times. But then 4. They can't balance how they do it, but they always seem to pass the ball more. And that was certainly evident yesterday against Tampa Bay, on Sunday against Tampa Bay, when with 18 minutes left and a 10-point lead, they passed the ball 12 times to the 2 times that they ran the ball. Now, they were down eventually, and then they had to pass the ball 4 more times. But it just goes to show, like, you have to know how to manage the game. And running the ball twice doesn't, stop the clock. And that seems to be their problem. Even when in the Bears game, they ran the ball, it'd be like 1 run to 2 passes. And it's like, you have to commit to running the ball and running out clock versus thinking, you know what, Matt Ryan, he's going to get at the completion and we're going to be able to burn. They're trying to do too much. They're reliant on Matt Ryan being such a good passer that he's going to make the completion. And they're going in for they're too greedy. It's like sometimes Tampa Bay at the end of yesterday's game, they gave back the ball to Tampa Bay. They went on a 3 and out, ran it 3 times. Yeah, take it. 1:40 off the clock versus Atlanta going all out and taking 30, 40 seconds sometimes off the clock because they're willing to pass 2 incomplete passes and then they run it. Oh, it's too late then, Atlanta. And I think going forward, they're going to have to realize that whoever comes in next year is going to have to be a lot more smarter than that. And they're going to have to be more 2-dimensional because although it is a fantastic passing attack, and that's why I was so high on the Atlanta Falcons to begin the year, I just think that their passing attack, I finally clicked with me. I was like, they're too reliant on it. It's too good for their own good.
That's great. You know what's really sad is that you would think they would have learned their lesson, not just this season, but that was the same exact problem that they lost that Super Bowl to New England against 28-3 against Tom Brady. No, mind you. And there he is again this past Sunday, and they have a double-digit lead, and they're doing the exact same thing. They're throwing the ball when they should just try to sit on the lead. Like, why is this so complicated for them? I truly don't understand it. This is the only team in the NFL that this can happen to, mind you. This can't happen to the Raiders or the Jets or any other team. If you came and told me, hey, this team blew a 17-point lead in halftime for the 4th time this year, I'd point at you and instantly say Falcons. I know it's them in a heartbeat because that's all they know how to do. It's mind-boggling that a team with that much talent on offense can't figure out how to sit on a lead. It's like it's foreign to them. It's like I truly don't understand it. I'm glad Mark took a long enough look at it to try to decipher it because it makes me go insane. I can't imagine what the good people of Atlanta go through because those people, they should have a Super Bowl championship right now. But since that team can't sit on a lead, they don't and have one of the worst playoff losses in history of any sport. It's just sad. There's no way getting around it. It's just sad.
Well, the Super Bowl thing, at least we could have moved on from it had they learned their lesson. But Aristotle was the one that said, we are what we repeatedly do. And it's just it's their DNA, it seems, at this point, that it doesn't matter who the head coach is. they, I don't know, they let Matt Ryan manage the game, and they're just passing too frequently. And it seems to be a quick fix solution. Run the ball.
It seems easy to us, but the moment they get double-digit point leads, like Mark said, like the moment they got up to like, what was it, 17-0 against Tampa Bay, I was like, they ain't winning that game. I just knew it in my bones. They ain't winning that game. They're gonna blow it. I don't care that the Tampa Bay offense put up 66 yards of offense. Excuse me, in the first half. They ain't winning that game, and it happened. It's a mental thing now. They just know they can't hang on to a lead, and I think a new coach has to come in and kind of like rebuild them from the ground up, not the talent wise, but just mentally, like show them that they can hold on to leads, that it is possible to do it. Because I truly think that when they get in that position, they just get scared. They don't know what to do because it's happened so much that they don't know what to do. It's scary to them.
Well, it is, and it's a lovely way to move on to our next game. But like I said, 4 times this year, they had a 95% chance of winning. And it's that momentum that other teams are able to deal with, Hayden, as we come to another,
beautifully done,
I suppose, junction in our episode here. And something that we're looking forward to with 2 weeks to go is there's some teams that are getting super hot, and there's other teams I'm not so sure about in that playoff race.
Yeah. There's one team that's a little hot and frisky and sexy right now. It's Baltimore Ravens. Am I right, Mark? Sexiest.
Baltimore is one of them. I think there's more than just Baltimore. But yeah, I'd let you run right on Baltimore because I think I've gushed over them too much over the last 2 or 3 weeks.
All right, I'll gush on Baltimore because I really like this Ravens team right now. Listen, I tried to warn y'all last week that this Baltimore team is about to go on a tear. And yeah, did they murder Jacksonville 40-14? Yeah, and they did what we expected them to do. But the problem isn't just that they're playing really good and their schedule is easy. I mean, look at the rest of their schedule. They got a Giants team in Baltimore that Giants are kind of out of whack and they're looking down on themselves right now because, they don't got a quarterback. And then the final game of the regular season is on the road against Cincinnati. That's a cupcake schedule if I ever saw one. No offense to those two teams, but that should be 2 easy wins for Baltimore. Ravens are playing good, and it's all about getting hot in December and playing good football and getting an invite to the dance and making some trouble. I really feel like the Ravens can fit that mold of a team that, like the Titans last year, that got super hot in December and then pulled an upset on Wild Card Weekend and then made it to the AFC Championship game. If you remember the Giants Super Bowls from like a decade ago, 2011 and 2007, those Giants teams were incredibly flawed and had terrible vast majorities of the regular season, and then got hot in December, go on a magical run in the playoffs, beat a bunch of teams they weren't supposed to, and then win the Super Bowl against a team that vastly outmatched them. It can happen. Some people don't like to believe in momentum and don't think it's a real thing and like, oh, it's a bunch of hogwash. I believe it's a very real thing. And I promise you, the Ravens have it. They got it in spades. And if this team gets to the playoffs, like I know they will be a playoff seed. Mark it down. If you want to put money on it, that's how confident I am in it. They're going to be in the postseason. The rest of the AFC needs to be afraid because they're cooking with fire and they are going to start knocking teams out left and right. It's happening. And people should be very afraid of the Ravens. They should be very, very afraid.
What a shame it would be if they didn't get in. Now, I'd probably be a bit more tentative than you just because I don't like that they can't, control their own destiny, essentially. I mean, it does come into focus a bit more. Like you said, they have a couple of easy remaining games. And, had they had them earlier on in the year, it also would have helped their record and we would have been a bit higher on them sooner. But I'm glad that one of the things that I asked for to happen, 2 weeks ago, was I wanted them to figure out the running back situation. I said they needed someone in the backfield that was going to take eyes off Lamar Jackson. And Lamar Jackson has started playing well because, lo and behold, J.K. Dobbins has been fantastic. I picked him up in my fantasy league. I told everyone listening, I said, pick him up. And he's gone on now 4 straight games with a touchdown, which is some kind of rookie record, which seems a bit remarkable. It must be a franchise record, if anything else. But it definitely has opened up the Ravens offense a bit more. And it's what they needed last year to get, like they needed the running game to be working for everything to work. And Mark Ingram hasn't been himself. It was kind of expected. He was getting a bit older. That's why you draft J.K. Dobbins in the second round. But then Gus Edwards was kind of, taking the focus sometimes because everyone has to do this split backfield now, except for the Titans, it seems. But now they have J.K. Dobbins, who is playing fantastic. And it just opens them all up. And like you said about momentum, I know people don't like to believe in it. It's a cool thing to say, oh, I don't believe in momentum. Call it whatever you want. It's just when you get hot, when it, like the chemistry all comes together, when you can seemingly do no wrong because you're all on the same page, whatever cliche you need to make it or to put your mind at ease, call it anything. Momentum is what it's most easiest to refer to, and Baltimore has it reaching the playoffs. And like you said about teams that kind of aren't hot earlier in the year, the Cardinals in their lone playoffs appearance, they were considered one of the worst teams to make a playoff, one of the worst division winners. They got there because they won and they got hot and they made the Super Bowl then. And it's all about getting to the dance, like you say. But it's when you get there, and like Tennessee, that's the exact example I was thinking of last year. When you can seemingly do no wrong, like this Baltimore team is, you're scary, and you just go in and teams are going to be doubting you. There's only tape for a certain number of weeks that you've been putting up versus other teams looking at the likes of Green Bay and thinking, oh, this is how we're going to get to them. Like I've talked about how I think Buffalo could be beaten is if you're able to take Stephon Diggs out of the game. Whereas Baltimore, it's almost like everyone's put them into the back of their mind and now they're back again. And like if we had seen a snapshot of like this week's game back in the summer and we said this is going to be the Ravens 2 weeks before the playoffs, we would have been thinking, oh, the playoffs, yeah, sure, they were never in doubt for this Ravens team. We knew that they were going there. I think they look fantastic. And yeah, they're absolutely scary. Now, another team, if we can move off Baltimore, Hayden, in case you had any more point, I just mentioned my other two teams that I think are entering with a lot of momentum. Buffalo is one. And why I say that is not that it took me any longer to come around to Buffalo. I knew that they were good, but I did pick against them in the likes of the Pittsburgh game because they were warming up and they're certainly on the scene now. Like, yeah, they looked fantastic, obviously, on the weekend. What was it? 43 points they put up. Well, the Bills had that spell against New England, Miami, or sorry, no, it was against Kansas City, Tennessee, New England, and the Jets.
Yes.
Where they just look poor. And I remember someone tweeting at me on Twitter, obviously, and giving out and saying, oh, what am I watching? I said, I just watched the last 4 games. They struggled. Since then, they're averaging 35 points a game the last 5 games or whatever it is. I think it's 35 points a game. What was it? 43 on Saturday. Like, they're super hot. And it's what we put as the asterisks against them last year, that they had no offense. Well, look, they got Stephon Diggs and it's just worked out beautifully for them. Josh Allen, again, I just can't say I trust him as a franchise quarterback. It doesn't matter. He's there for now. He looks fantastic in the here and now. And his connection with Stephon Diggs, Cole Beasley obviously there. John Brown is on IR, like he seems to always be. And then they have they're after setting the record for the most amount of touchdowns caught by a wide receiver by a franchise. They have like 12 this year. That's absolutely, or not by a wide receiver, a receiving touchdown, I should say. And it just speaks volumes about the team that they are doing. They're finding ways to win. And that's the scariest thing that you can do. You know, we talked about Kansas City doing the same thing kind of last year, that they can win in any different way. And Buffalo is just, scary. And it's kind of a shame, and probably looking for some teams that they don't have the Bills fans in the stadium right now, because that would be an even more ferocious thing with a home playoff game coming up. They won't have it, but you wouldn't want to play them in the playoffs anyway, the way Josh Allen is working, and obviously the defense is clicking.
God, I wish we could see a home game for Buffalo with those fans in attendance. I mean, they were out waiting for them on the tarmac when they got home from that game against Denver. They were all out there at 1:30 in the morning to welcome home their reigning AFC East champions for the first time in 25 years. I know that had to feel good for the people of Buffalo. But we're talking about momentum, and the Bills definitely got it. But what the Bills have for certain is they're cooking with confidence. They got confidence in spades right now. They know what they are. They feel good about themselves. And like Mark said, there's still just a tiny shadow of a doubt about Josh Allen, only because I'm just having flashbacks to that playoff run last year and how it ended in the fourth quarter. I just worry a bit that maybe when they get into a wild card game, maybe that bad Josh Allen will come back. It has been rare to see bad Josh Allen this year. He has been good for the vast majority of it, especially here lately. It feels like he's having a brand new great game every single freaking week. The Bills aren't just good. They aren't just great. I feel like they're one of the top AFC contenders. I actually have them ranked above the Steelers, in my honest opinion. It goes Chiefs, Steelers, not Chiefs. It goes Chiefs, Bills, Steelers in my power ranking of AFC teams right now. I love the Bills so much, and I hope they go on a deep playoff run. The good people of Buffalo deserve it.
I think, yeah, obviously it should be deep. I mean, I always think it's funny, how deep can the playoffs be? It's 3 games until the Super Bowl,
Right.
And you can have a bye sometimes as well that, you take it game by game. It'll be interesting to see how they match up now with whatever opponent that you get, as I've said in the past, I sometimes wonder would a top cornerback be able to rule out, the impact that Stephon Diggs can have in the game. And that's when you're going to start to see some holes in the offense. But then the other thing is that Josh Allen that you talk about, that was because he didn't have enough talent last year.
Right.
And that's
Right.
what Stephon Diggs is allowed to open up.
Mm.
And that kind of, we're both making the same point from a different angle about could the wheels fall off quicker if you're able to do that. But as it sets up, like if they're able to avoid the Steelers, that's where I said Joe Hayden, as division winners, they'll avoid the Steelers. But that's the one I want them to avoid for their own sakes, because Joe Hayden missed that game, and I just think it would have been the difference in the Pittsburgh-Buffalo matchup a couple of weeks ago. So, super hot. And to put a bow on the good momentum, if you want to call it that, before we get to the bad momentum, I suppose Green Bay, because we have to obviously mention an NFC team. But Green Bay, to me, obviously, Aaron Rodgers. Now, we said Russell Wilson needed to salvage the MVP race against Washington, and I'm not sure that he did that. Whereas Aaron Rodgers went and got that magical number 40 touchdown before anyone else, which it seems to be the MVP needs to be also the one that puts up the most touchdown in the last couple of years. Mm-hmm. We previewed them a bunch last week or the last couple of weeks, so we won't go too much into it. But Aaron Rodgers is obviously playing phenomenal. And the scariest thing in football is a hot quarterback.
Yep.
And that's what the other things is like. Buffalo's offense is what's impressing me, and certainly the Ravens' offense, but the Ravens as a whole are just clicking. Whereas it kind of comes down to the quarterback. When you have the best quarterback, I'm not saying the best in the game, but he's playing the best right now. Aaron Rodgers is, and that's why he's potentially going to win the MVP. That's what's going to scare you, and certainly that matchup with Davante Adams. Now, the one thing is that Davante Adams has that big streak of getting a touchdown, and we play the numbers game sometimes in this show if you haven't heard. And what happens if it means that he's going to run out of juice in the playoffs? So that's when the streak is going to be snapped, because something comes up that he does get man marked and taken out of the game. But no, I'm not here to diss on the Green Bay Packers right now. I think they're the scariest team coming out of the NFC, obviously, because look at what's happening in the Saints. To move on to them, one of the bad is the Saints. I mean, they've just lost to the Eagles. They lost on Sunday to Kansas City. And now they have Michael Thomas missing games once more. He's not, he's going to be injured, and they hope to get him back or whatever. And it's Breeze is back in. It's like they had this continuity going for them, even though it was with Taysom Hill, that it's just, I think it's kind of like trucking along right now, and it's not my favorite that they've lost these couple of games, and they have a tough short week playing Minnesota on Christmas Day. And there's something about New Orleans that they've lost those couple of games. And when you're playing against your Kansas City Chiefs, and I thought Kansas City, again, they made sure it was a one-score game to keep that streak alive at 7 in a row or 6 in a row now of one-score games. But New Orleans, they just look like a team to me that's lost that juice, that we were so high on them. But in the last couple of weeks, their star has faded a little bit.
Just a wee bit. I mean, it all kind of ties in together with like the Packers ascending and the Saints kind of descending, because the Packers take over the 1 seed, and that's great for them because, home field advantage really hasn't been a thing for the vast majority of the season without fans. But going to Lambeau in January and February, not February, but most of January, that's no joke. Even with no fans, having to play in the cold And in the environments for a team like the Rams, who's played in the dome the entire season, or a team like the Saints, who has an aging quarterback, and having him play in the cold in January is not a good idea. That is a very, very bad idea, especially with a jacked up rib cage. That is no bueno. So it all kind of goes hand in hand, that I don't think that the Saints are necessarily like on the full downswing. I still think they're the safe bet to get the second seed. I think that if we had to put money on it, they'll get it, but they really missed their opportunity to really lock up the first seed. And they really needed that to kind of force everybody to have to come to them to have the postseason flow through them. And if it comes to an NFC championship game in Lambeau Field, that's really not ideal for Drew Brees right now. That is not ideal at all, but Packers are doing good. Saints need to kind of rally the ship, especially with the Seahawks kind of looming in the background. Saints kind of got to write it in a very quick sort of way, to put it bluntly.
Maybe I'm just telling myself that the Saints are kind of not, again, I'm not saying they're going off a cliff. I'm just saying that momentum isn't on their side right now. And it's like the Cardinals, my team, of course, if they get in as the number 7 and it's the Saints that they play, I'd certainly take the Saints over Green Bay. So yeah, absolutely. Happy days that they're after changing the seeding there. But it's like, if the Cardinals were to climb, say, or if the Seahawks were to climb into the number 2, or the Rams and the Seahawks, obviously that's a bit of it's in flux at the moment. But like, if I had to pick my poison between the NFC West winner and the Saints, it's a tough one. Yeah, the Cardinals have the past experience of the NFC West opponent, but I don't know. I just feel like the Saints are getting sloppy. That's the way to put it. I think they've just gotten sloppy the last couple of weeks. Again, we picked Kansas City to win that game, but I just thought there was a bit of a shift there with New Orleans against Kansas City, that you wanted to see them look fiercely competitive against Kansas City, which they didn't so much. Kansas City was in complete control, and I guess I can't blame them either for that. And then maybe you want to chalk down the Philadelphia win to a fluke. But I just think that they're a team that to me isn't going in with momentum. One I am more worried about, and perhaps people listening might be surprised, seeing as it's my Indianapolis Colts, who I projected at the beginning of the season to get into the playoffs. But while I projected them to get into the playoffs, I should add there was a bit of hesitancy to me predicting them at the time, because I was getting told from chances suppose at the time that they couldn't do it, and maybe I was believing them. But I think deep down I did believe that Indianapolis, with the defense and all, but the way they're hobbling in with Phillip Rivers, I don't have any problem with them putting Tyrod Taylor in for a couple of series. It is a good part of their game plan right now. Jonathan Taylor and Naheem Hines, it's excellent that they have the running backs, but they just scraped the Texans on the weekend. And you said in your preview last week that they were going to coast that game, and I had my reservations then. I said, no, that is one that I'd watch, and I know the Texans are better than the record suggests, but I just thought, the Colts, again, they need to be blowing out these teams, because now they have Pittsburgh coming up, who that's going to be a really tough game, and they could look brutal against them, so that could take off their, lose a bit of momentum to that. Maybe they have a gimme going in to the playoffs then, because they'll have Jacksonville, and Jacksonville might want the number 1 overall pick. Not that they're tanking, but that I said to David, and I said at the top of the show that I wouldn't give the Indianapolis Colts game as a win to the Jags, because they should be able to use it as a tee-up game. So maybe that will save their momentum. But for right now, they don't look like a serious threat to me. I don't see them progressing past the wild card round.
Mm-hmm. That's kind of where I have them pegged too, that they feel like they're primed to get picked off by a top seed in the wild card round. They're just going to get popped in the mouth and not get back up. That's honestly what they feel like to me, even though they've had a pretty solid season and one to be proud of. I mean, double-digit wins and making the wild card with, stuff that was kind of thrown together in the offseason. You got Phillip Rivers to come in and just hoped it would all work. And it kind of did to a certain degree, but excuse me, Mark's right. It's really going to depend on their matchup, but whoever gets the Colts, I think, is going to get kind of a lucky draw. They're going to pop this team in the mouth, and the Colts just aren't going to get back up from it.
If the Colts get in as the number 4, which they obviously they'll play the Browns as of right now, which, it sounds like a good game, but I think the Browns will have enough to do that. And
they beat them early in the season.
Right, and if they go in as the number 6, then you're looking at the Steelers you're looking at the Bills. Yeah, sorry, the Steelers or the Bills, depending on how that shapes up. So, like, if your teams that they're going to be playing are the Steelers, the Bills, or the Browns, that's tough. I think the only matchup they'd want, I don't know how this could even work out, but if they were able to get Tennessee as a division, if Tennessee wins the division, then they get to play them. But navigating the playoffs, I think it's very difficult for Indianapolis right now. They're not clicking for me. The defense, like, again, it's the Sean Watson that they're playing, but they still gave him the 20 points or whatever on the weekend when they had no no wide receivers. And our boy Kiki Kute, who we obviously previewed well on last week's show, was able to step up in that. Yeah, Zaddy for the Indiana. I hope they recapture it. But I meant to say this on another show. Imagine they had Andrew Luck. All would be changed. And I know you can say imagine, but that hasn't even been carried into this year, that when Philip Rivers is playing as bad as he has. Bad at sometimes. I mean, I'm sure it's been discussed in Indianapolis, but it's not something that's been picked up by podcasts, national media, etc. We might talk about it again another time, but it went through my head the other day. I would be super scared of a team that had him. Maybe he'd be an MVP candidate this year. Look, we are also forgetting that T.Y. Hilton is stepping up the last couple of weeks as well. So it's not like it's all bad for Tennessee, for Indianapolis, but it's not as good as it could be either when we're talking about how fierce this playoff battle is and stuff. And I suppose, are we writing off Miami then?
Miami's got a tough slate coming up. They got to play the Raiders this coming weekend, and then the Bills to close out the season. And the Bills are still going to be fighting for something, and the Raiders can play spoiler. But if we're assuming, like I am, that the Ravens are going to make the playoffs, then that also therefore assumes that the Dolphins are going to lose one of their final 2 games at some point, if I'm doing my math correctly.
Yeah, no, I'm the exact same. I just don't have Miami getting in, and it's probably because of that Bills game. But I don't have them getting in, and they should have made easy work of New England over the weekend. It was a very sloppy first half. We obviously picked New England and went against us, but like, it was worth a shot because of how it played out. Again, the defense, Miami's defense, was able to step up eventually, but it was a bit worrying. And again, it probably comes back to Tua and all the I've mentioned 1,000 times. So yeah, I just don't think that they have enough to get in, which is a shame for them. But look, they can look forward, and at the beginning of the season, if they thought they were going to be in with a shot again into the playoffs, they'd have taken it. It's obviously a different story when you're here and you want to get to the dance, but
yeah,
unfortunately for them, I don't think it's going to be anyway. Baltimore deserves to be there. I hope they get in. Baltimore, Cleveland, and Indianapolis and that's it. I don't know if the rest of the teams have been eliminated. I believe they have. That it literally is those teams and the Raiders, who no one's given the Raiders a chance.
Yeah, that should be the teams that are currently in the hunt. Nobody's going to give the Raiders a chance. They don't deserve it because of how they played lately. But yeah, it should come down to Baltimore and Miami for that final wild card. And then the rest is just seeding and sorting itself out.
And then those matchups they take on all kinds of permutations of what could be a good matchup, what's a bad matchup. The Colts look like the one you'd want. Mm-hmm. But and it's kind of a good time to preview it as well, with the 2 weeks left. Like we said, Pittsburgh against Indianapolis could open things up this week for other teams to want to slide in and stuff. But then Jacksonville after that. And like you said, Baltimore has the 2 super easy games. So when Miami does look like it's a bit tough when they're the game behind Indianapolis as is. So they would have to beat Buffalo while hoping that Indianapolis loses to Pittsburgh.
Yeah, it's tough. It's going to be tough sledding for a lot of teams. I hit my mic on that one, and I'm sorry for that. But it's tough sledding for a lot of teams these last 2 weeks. It's crunch time. It doesn't have to be pretty if you win these games. Just find a way to win, even if it's dog trash ugly. Get a win, get your ticket. That is all that matters at this point for all of these teams. And yeah, it'll be interesting to see, like, who do you want to play? Like, okay, you could say the Colts, but like then you could argue, maybe the inexperience of the Browns in the postseason could be a selling point. Like, hey, maybe we want to play the Browns even though they're hot. They don't know what postseason football is like. Who knows? Maybe we could catch them slipping. It just depends on your prerogative of what you want at this point.
Yeah, no, it's a great way of looking at it, because there is going to be, heart-to-hearts over Christmas when you're telling yourself and you're hyping yourself up and saying this is how our team can get by, especially if there's a loss or a win here and there. And it's an interesting one to figure out. I suppose with that in mind, I almost want to give an honorable mention to someone that I think could go in with a lot of momentum. And I can't tell you exactly who it's going to be right now, but whoever wins the NFC East, it's very difficult now for Philadelphia to get in. But like, they would have been a tricky team with the way Jalen Hurts is playing. And you rewind the episode if you want to hear why. But it looks like it's going to be Washington.
Mm-hmm.
And like, because they play now, they've Carolina this week in the revenge game, which would have been a nice one to preview for Ron Rivera.
Yes.
And then they will have Washington, Philadelphia is the last game. So it's going to be, if Carolina beats Washington, then it sets up a real nail biter against Philadelphia in the last week. And that would be fantastic, that pass rush against Jalen Hurts. I love Carolina to beat Washington just to have that in the last week. It would be really exciting.
Mm-hmm.
I presume now Washington's going to be able to, tie up that division. It seems.
We actually have a clinching scenario for the NFC East this weekend. If Washington beats Carolina and the Ravens beat the Giants, it's over. Washington wins it.
Oh wow! So
yeah,
I wasn't even sure of how exactly it could, but there you go.
Yeah.
So Washington should go in with a bit of momentum, the way that obviously the defense is playing, and Alex Smith, obviously it hinges on him coming back, but I think that he should be, and they would go in scary because of the defense. That's not lie.
Right.
Like, it's because of the defense that they'd be scary, but like they could wreak havoc on a few of those teams the way they're playing. They've already done it, or well, kind of they got their chance at Seattle this week, which didn't work out for you. Obviously, you had them in your picks.
Yeah.
But it'd be really good to see them against the likes of New Orleans or something,
That could. Hey, quarterback with a bad ribcage. It'd be a bad matchup against that best defensive line. And talk about momentum, and this is the last thing we're going to mention about it. Talk about momentum for Ron Rivera, Coach of the Year talk that I've seen you hyping up on Twitter. If he can clinch the division against the team that fired him, I feel like that's the exclamation point on the resume.
For Coach of the Year?
Yeah, Coach of the Year. Why not? Dude beat cancer and won the division. Give him Coach of the Year.
Oh, sorry. No, I was having in my head comeback Coach of the Year.
No. Coach of the Year. Just Coach of the Year.
No, I was getting my two awards. Oh, no, it's Coach of the Year. But I think Coach of the Year, again, like I was saying on Twitter before, and like we said on the season preview at the very beginning, was as long as he was on the sideline this year. And it wasn't just the cancer scare. It was the taking on the organization like he did with the cancer scare. It wasn't just winning games, it was being competitive, winning games. He took on a weird situation, succeeded in it, and made some tough decisions and succeeded with it. And it was an exciting tale. And I didn't like seeing Dwayne Haskins back in the other day, but like, it wasn't his decision to do that. Right. But obviously we'll come off it. That was supposed to be an honorable mention. I don't think the momentum is worth that much. They still will probably be who everyone fancies in the playoffs, bar maybe the Cardinals. But there's our super short hour and 10-minute long episode for everyone.
Merry Christmas, everybody. So that's it for this week. We'll be back next week, and in fact, the next time we talk to you guys will be January 1st, that Friday. So next time we talk will be in the new year, so that'll be fun. That's Mark. I'm Hayden. I hope you all have a safe and happy holidays, Christmas, Hanukkah, whatever you celebrate. I hope you have a fun and festive time with your family, and hope we get good football this week. It should be fun. So once again, if you're looking for our picks, they will be up on social media in the coming days, at NFLandU, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, at One Super Bowl Drive for Mark as well. You can get them anywhere. We're on social media, basically. Just look for our picks, and they're going to be super, and they're going to be sexy, and we're going to finally beat the guest picker. That's my Christmas present this week. Just sneak that one in there.
It's been a great, obviously, few months doing the show. I know that seems not over yet. It obviously seems appropriate as the calendar year draws to a close. So it's obviously been a lot of fun, and we've very little football left to go until it gets extremely serious. So I hope everyone enjoys their Christmas break, and we're going to enjoy an extra couple of days because we got this podcast done early, and we'll see you in the new year.
See you guys in the new year. Have fun. Bye.